Vanilla. It's the word we use for plain, boring, ordinary. But real vanilla is the second most expensive spice on Earth, a commodity that has surpassed the price of silver. This orchid fueled colonial empires, defied European science for 300 years, and was finally unlocked by a 12-year-old enslaved boy. How it became liquid gold is far darker than anything in your kitchen suggests. Long before European empires coveted this spice, the Totonac people cultivated the wild orchid on the shade-grown forest terraces of Papantla along the Gulf of Mexico. To them, the vine was sacred, a divine gift to be harvested with quiet reverence. But vanilla's origins are not peaceful, they are rooted in conquest. In the 15th century, the Aztecs swept through Totonac territories, reducing this sacred plant to a spoil of war. The Aztec state forced the Totonac to pay a regular tribute in cured vanilla beans, which they called tlilxochitl, literally, black flour. This coveted commodity traveled to the capital of Tenochtitlan, where elites blended it into bitter ceremonial chocolate drinks. Modern science confirms this history. Gas chromatography of ancient ceramic sherds has recovered molecular residues of vanillin alongside cacao lipids. 16th century texts like the Florentine Codex and the Badianus manuscript further document vanilla's role as a medicine and elite ritual offering. Long before it became a baking staple, vanilla functioned as an ancient currency of power, ritual, and imperial extraction. Following the fall of Tenochtitlan, Spanish conquerors seized this dark flower and turned it into an exclusive imperial monopoly. They established a rigid shipping network. Every single vanilla bean harvested in the mountains of Veracruz had to be registered, inspected, and licensed by the Casa de Contratación in Seville before it could touch European soil. The Spanish crown guarded this supply chain with ruthless administrative force. For nearly 3 centuries, from the 1520s until the late 18th century, Spain controlled the global market. They transformed a sacred Mesoamerican ritual offering into an ultra-premium court luxury, accessible only to royal families and high society aristocrats in Madrid, Paris, and London. But Europe faced a frustrating barrier. They could import the cured pods, but the living orchids refused to cooperate. European botanists smuggled healthy green vines to botanical gardens in London, Paris, and Amsterdam. They planted them in rich soil, watered them under custom glass greenhouses, and watched the vines grow. But the plants refused to produce fruit. For 270 years, every single vanilla orchid planted outside of Mexico remained completely sterile. This stagnation stemmed directly from violent extraction. The colonizers took the plant, but they left behind the living ecosystem that sustained it. They accumulated massive wealth off indigenous labor while forcing the rest of the world into artificial scarcity. This should make you angry. The Spanish Empire maintained this global chokehold purely through colonial dominance and sheer luck, entirely ignorant of the biological secret hidden inside the flower. The biological reality of vanilla planifolia is rooted in extreme evolutionary isolation. Inside every vanilla orchid lies a tight biological lock, a physical barrier called the rostellum. This tough, membranous shield sits directly between the male anther and the female stigma, completely blocking self-pollination. The plant cannot fertilize itself. For millennia, the orchid relied on a single evolutionary partner, the female stingless bee of the genus Melipona, native only to the forests of Mexico. This specific bee possesses the exact physical size and weight required to force the rostellum aside, lifting the barrier while gathering nectar and depositing pollen onto the receptive stigma. When colonial empires dragged the vines to tropical outposts in Reunion, Java, and Mauritius, they severed this delicate ecological connection. Without their native pollinator, the transplanted orchids bloomed for a single morning, withered, and dropped to the forest floor, leaving plantations entirely sterile. In 1841, on the French colonial island of Reunion, a 12-year-old enslaved boy named Edmond Albius solved the mystery. Working on a plantation under a local horticulturist, Albius spent his childhood in forced labor, yet he possessed an extraordinary, intuitive understanding of the botanical life around him. He bypassed the complex theories of academic botanists with a simple, brilliant physical gesture. Albius realized he could open the orchid's evolutionary lock using nothing more than a splinter of bamboo and his own thumb. By inserting the sliver of wood into the flower, he lifted the rostellum, the flap blocking fertilization, and pressed the pollen-bearing anther directly onto the receptive stigma. The entire process took 3 seconds. A 12-year-old enslaved boy did what European science could not. This physical hack shattered the Spanish trade monopoly and altered global commerce forever. It allowed massive plantations to spread across French colonies, turning a sterile curiosity into an incredibly valuable cash crop. Yet, despite unlocking this immense wealth, Albius gained no money, patent, or freedom for his discovery. He remained enslaved until French abolition in 1848 and died decades later in absolute poverty. His genius laid the foundation for the entire modern vanilla trade, while the colonial empire pocketed the massive riches his labor made possible. French colonial developers seized on this new botanical reality, carrying the orchid across the Indian Ocean to Madagascar. The island's humid volcanic highlands proved perfect, eventually making Madagascar the undisputed powerhouse of global vanilla production. But Albius's trick did not make vanilla easy. It made it a relentless, handcrafted ordeal. Every single year, Malagasy smallholders must walk their fields daily, inspecting thousands of vines. The orchid's pale green flower opens for only a single morning, typically between 5 and 11 a.m. Miss that narrow 6-hour window, and the flower wilts, sterile and worthless. Using a sliver of wood and a quick press of the thumb, workers must pollinate each bloom, one by one, thousands of times over. But the labor only begins at fertilization. Once harvested months later, the green pods undergo a brutal, multi-stage curing process, scalding in hot water, sweating under heavy blankets, weeks of precise sun drying, and months of conditioning in dark boxes. Growers endure this physical grind on razor-thin farm gate margins, often receiving a tiny fraction of the retail price, proving that vanilla's high value rests entirely on cheap, exhausting human sweat. The grueling physical harvest is only the beginning, the dark truth. According to local police and media reports, a wave of organized crime has swept Madagascar's Sava region. Vanilla theft is now endemic, forcing impoverished farmers to patrol their fields night and day. This has created a desperate defense culture, where growers guard their vines with machetes, spears, and handmade firearms. Rustlers strip the green beans before they mature, branding the stolen pods with custom marks to launder them into black market channels. What began as simple crop theft has evolved into a violent, criminal protection economy. On these remote plantations, Malagasy growers are trapped on the front lines, acting as both the primary targets of the vanilla mafia and the armed defenders of their own survival. Walk into any grocery store today, and vanilla is everywhere, in shampoos, ice cream, and cheap baked goods. But look closely at the ingredient labels. Over 99% of vanilla-flavored products on those shelves contain absolutely zero real vanilla. Instead, you are consuming synthetic vanillin, a cheap industrial chemical engineered in factories. This substitute is commonly derived from crude oil or wood pulp byproducts of the paper industry. Because this chemical imitation costs as little as $2 a kilogram to scale, it completely displaced the natural bean in mass markets. Meanwhile, real vanilla remains an ultra-luxury ingredient. The global food industry built a massive empire by replacing a violent hand-harvested crop with petrochemical waste. This should make you angry. Next time you reach for that bland bottle of vanilla, remember the theft and exploitation sealed inside. We diluted a sacred orchid into a synthetic lie, while the real luxury remains stained by violence. What is the true price of our taste? Subscribe for more untold histories.